Plugin of the week comes from Relab Development. It's the VSR REV6000. This is an emulation of the reverb side of the System 6000 unit by TC Electronic. This is a hardware unit they came out with, I believe, around 2000 or so. They spent years and years and years developing algorithms to create realistic spaces and turn those algorithms into, dump them into this machine where you can load them up and get really cool sounding spaces. This is used a lot in post-production and film, but it has a lot of uses in music as well. TC Electronic has always made some great sounding stuff. And so Relab's emulation of it is right on point. And so I'm going to kind of break this down bit by bit. There are three main windows when you open up the plugin. The main window is the start one. There's an advanced window where you get into deeper settings, and then the time frequency section, which allows you to break it down sort of in multi-band style. So we'll start here. Here we have a dry level, early reflection level, and reverb level, so it allows you to separate those out. You got a series of locations that you can go through here. These are the spaces that they've done, some concert halls, bathrooms, living rooms, theaters, churches, etc. We'll start with the jazz club here, and you could adapt these to be anything you want. There's also a big default preset browser here that you can kind of go through, or a preset browser we can go through and find some setups, as a good starting point, just with all of that. And it looks like, you could set your own favorites and all of that sort of thing. So normal stuff there. So you start here. This is where you start. And then you can shape the early reflections and reverb in their most basic level. So this sets the low color, which they describe as kind of defining the spectral balance of the low frequency early reflections. Same with the high color here. The decrease feature, what this does is it basically, if you leave it at its 0 setting, it gives you the sort of natural ambient space as you would expect it. But basically the way that they set up early reflections, they define them in 3 reflection levels. So the first reflections are the ones that come off the immediate surfaces. And then if it bounces off 2 surfaces, that's a second order. Bounces off 3 surfaces and get back to you, that's third order. So as we kind of go through the decrease control, and you can see it's sort of mapped here to the fader panel, which you can actually get rid of if you don't like to see that. That's with the original unit, somewhat what it looks like with the fader. If you do that, what it does is it kind of leans towards the second and third order reflections, so you get like a deeper kind of sound. It will kind of it'll kind of move the early reflections sort of backwards, so you get the longer delay times of the early reflection pattern that sort of defines the space. And then you have the reverb control here. So we have reverb time. We have a size control, so this sets the size of the space. Pre-delay. Now, pre-delay works on both the early reflections and the reverb. Sometimes pre-delay will only work on the reverb and not on the early reflection pattern. So think of the early reflection pattern as sort of defining the size of the space, and then the reverb is what's filling that size space. But this pre-delay allows you to kind of work with pre-delaying both. There's also a high frequency cut here. So this is basically just rolling off frequencies for the reverb. So we have that. That's all the basics here. You see in and out for input and output level adjustment. Then we can go to the advanced controls here. We have 2 controls here, early reflection start and early reflection end. So what this does is it basically shapes the way that when the early reflection starts. So as you start to bring this up, it starts to eliminate the earliest timings of reflection. So sometimes in shorter spaces, those first early reflections can create some odd phase issues. And so you can kind of delete them out or kind of lift them out doing here. And then you could do the same on the back end. So this is sort of eliminating them. Now that's different than sort of fading or balancing the difference between them, which is the decrease control, which will lean more energy toward them but not eliminate the early reflections or the first reflections. It'll move towards the second and third order. This will start eliminating them, and this will sort of back off the longer ones. So you have some control there. And you have the reverb type, that's normal and colored. So colored, the way they describe it, they say that the diffusion is a little bit, fuzzier or something, or in this case, it's more natural. And to me, it gives it a little bit more tonal color. You can kind of decide there. There's a diffuse control. So the diffusion will allow you to increase or decrease the density of the reverb reflections. There's a size control here. This is, it's not mapped to this, right? So this, I'm sorry, I believe it is mapped. Let me just double check, right? 5 and 5, yes. So those two are mapped, just allows you to get to both there. There's also a modulation control. So when you do the modulation control, you could select a modulation type. Some of them that do like the front rear are really designed a bit more for modulation in surround settings. The actual original unit isn't really wired up where you just say, oh, make it 5.0 or make it 7.1 or 7.1.2. It doesn't work like that. It basically just has a series of inputs and a series of outputs, and then you just decorrelate them to create the space that you want. And then you can store them as presets and do all of that sort of thing. And that's the way that you can kind of craft it. And then they don't have to stay to sort of standards of, you know, whatever myriad of new options kind of comes out in the surround immersive realm. So that's basically the way that works. So that works more like that. The left-right, essentially what it does is it kind of flips 180 somewhat of the phase in terms of the modulation, the way it's kind of moving the sound around. Chaos is kind of all over the place. Clockwise and counterclockwise does a 45-degree shift, and then sync will kind of time it to the tempo of your session. The modulation has a rate and a depth. Right? The depth can go up to 200%. So that allows you to exaggerate it and create some movement. This can be a real helpful way of kind of creating a little bit of decorrelation between the left and right side. There's also another way to operate this where you could operate it in stereo or in dual mono, which allows you to put different settings in the time frequency section between the left and the right, allowing you to do some decorrelation. You can also kind of turn off the center channel. So this turns off center channel early reflections, which will kind of give you like a wider sound. And this will give you kind of a deeper sound with the center channel early reflection. It's sort of phantom center, so it's not like left, center, right, but that's basically the way that it does. You know, early reflections that are centered, put it that way. And then we can adjust the decay time for the left and right a little bit differently. So this is sort of a global adjust for the decay time left and right. When we go to the time frequency section here, now we have a multi-band setup here where we have a multiplier or divider for reverb time within individual sections. Now, if this is set to dual mono, then here I will have separate controls for the left and right hand side. If this is set to stereo, then I have one set of controls here, right? And then, you know, I can either show the display or just kind of do it this way. Maybe this is a little bit easier way to adjust the crossover points between them. And then here we could just make, you know, shape the low end and high end reverb time, right? So that's one basic way. Is that going to go back? All right, there we go. All right, so that's the basics of it. Let's make some noise. So I just have like some drums set up in here so we can kind of see the space or hear the space, I guess. Let's leave it kind of where its default was, which is here, which is going to be too long for this. We'll start with the jazz club, but kind of pull the decay time back here and all of that. Now I have separate controls here over the early reflection of levels here and reverb. That's just early reflection. Right, so that gives you the sense of space. This kind of gives you just the raw reverb. Okay, we could shape the color high and low if we want to make it a little darker on the top end. Now, the decrease control, notice what happens here is I can kind of shift more of the reverb energy towards longer times, which will make it feel like the back end of the space kind of goes backward. This is really amazing for drums when you want that big drum sound. So check this out. So in a way, it's kind of like shifting where the ambient energy is. And if I throw a little pre-delay on top of that, then I can have a little high cut here. Leave that. Maybe it was a little choked. And then the size control, which you heard here. So I could still change this, and all these settings will stay the same, although they'll do a little bit different of a thing as I go to the different size settings. All right, so you can see just how much you can shape this. It's really amazing, you know, the level of detail and control and the way that you can, you know, really just shape the room with it. Now, as we start to kind of go here, this is getting to the early reflection. Okay, so maybe I'll kind of go to a little bit of a longer time that we had here, and then just so we can hear this a little better. Right, so that's kind of eliminating the shorter reflections, and this would eliminate some of the longer ones. So I could really, really shape the size of the space that way, you know, like how big I want it to be even within this parameter. I forgot that I had this size control right here as well, so I can... Now I can make it more or less diffusive. All right, so maybe I want to make the space feel a little bit more open, where if you want to bring warmth or density into something, you could go that way. We could also take here, you know, and go to the color town. Now notice the way that this changes the tonal character. Right, so that kind of just gives it a, to me, I hear it more as a bit more of like a tonal character, whereas this is a bit more, I don't know if it's generic or cleaner sounding to me. You know, again, you got that option. Then we could sort of work a little bit here. Let's just start with the left-right modulation here. And chaos is actually quite interesting. It seems to create a lot more variation sort of all over the place, which, creates a little bit more of an aliveness. But you could hear how, like, that, adds on to just some of the shaping of the space again. Here, let's see what happens when we take out the center channel. Right, that just to kind of give you that a bit more sense of space and size there. And then this I wish there was actually kind of a gain control, a balance control between the two. But I sort of understand it because I would probably want something in between where these two are. But that's really cool. And then if we kind of make them dual mono, then that just gives me the ability to sort of separate them out a little bit. Plus, I can control the left and right channel decay times, so I can actually shape these to be a little bit different to create a bit more decorrelation. All right, that low tom to the left, I can kind of get just a touch more reverb time to let that kind of resonate. But, whatever. It's just some subtle variation there. And if we had set this to dual mono, we could actually shape them even more dramatically here. Right, so let's just see just what I can do in terms of doing the damping. Well, this is a low damping control. Right, so this is high frequency reverb damping. I'm sorry. There's a shelf down here with a frequency that allows you to kind of shape the low end energy in a negative way to kind of roll it back a little bit if you want. And there's a high soften control. So this is like a shelving EQ. This is the frequency that it's set at. This is, kind of dropping it down on the reverb, not on the early reflections. Then there's a high frequency cut here. This is the sort of cutoff point, and there's a softening thing, which is a combination. It's not really an EQ thing. It's a whole variety of things that they kind of add in. But let's just see if we can soften up the top end of this a little bit. Kind of like tames the aggressiveness of the high end, which I believe is how they describe it. And then this is just rolling off low frequency energy. Here I can get into a more detailed approach, right? And then I got my crossover points here, which, if I look here, I can see my crossover points, that I can adjust to sort of shape that even more. And if I wanted to go back here, set this to dual mono, go back here. Now, that's the right channel. Let's take a look at the left channel and do something a bit different. So it would be nice if you could actually, in this mode, see sort of a shadowing of what the other one is, or maybe in a singular display where you could kind of see both and then sort of adjust them with a modifier key or something like that, left and right, so you could kind of see them. But, not the end of the world. I actually think this is super cool. You could also kind of do it with the faders if it's easier. I'm just doing with the graphics because it's sort of following what's going on here. There's a bunch of other things, features that are kind of built in. You got the default browser. You can, kind of access the manual, sort of do all of those things, resize the window, etc., import, export presets. All of those sorts of things. There is also the color of the window. Maybe I'm sorry, I could be wrong. I think maybe it is over here. Color. So you could go through the different, color configurations if those colors sort of drive you crazy. And, so it gives you a mapped out a series of options there. You can make the delay format in milliseconds or note. I'm not sure exactly what that means. Okay. Maybe that's something that's related to the hardware unit. You could display the faders or make them disappear if you don't want to look at them or if you're not using them. And there was one other thing that was up here. You can also display tooltips, which will allow you to kind of thumb your way over the settings and everything. And it'll give you a brief description of what the feature does. This one is really super cool if you're really into detailing and shaping out reverbs. Every parameter is super intelligent, the way that it's laid out. The early reflections sound incredible. The way that you can kind of really shape and control the space. All the different reverbs sound really good. Here, like I have one here, which I think is just the vocal. I don't know if I put up a hall program or something.
I see the headlines in the morning, and I don't know what to believe. These papers should come wrapped up with a warning for those of us who may be easily deceived. They're building cars that drive themselves now, sending civilians into space. They got experts on the TV and the radio, presenting the facts for one side of the case. And as I sit here by the fire, as our ancestors used to do, I can't help thinking I would give anything to still be so confused by the moon. I see the headlines in the morning, and I don't know what to believe. These papers should come wrapped up with a warning for those of us who...
So you could hear how like there's all very unique spaces, and starting there, you can at least have a point from which you can build. You notice that the size and decay settings don't change, so you can kind of take any of those and make them bigger or smaller. Make the size really big and the reverb time shorter. Change all the pre-delays, all the other stuff. And the thing is about some of these, because they're bigger spaces, there's going to be a natural pre-delay that exists. But just all the layers and the detail of all the layers that come back, particularly in the halls, is really amazing. It's TC Electronics has always made some, in a very quiet way, has always made some really amazing things. And I think this reverb unit, or this emulation by Relab, it's really Relab capturing this, have done like an exquisite job with this. As of the recording of this video, this is on demo 1 week before release. So if you're watching this video, it's not going to be released for another week. And if it's already past that week period, then you obviously have the chance to pick it up. But absolutely check this out. Just like if you're like a person who likes to tweak reverbs and really dial something in, This is pretty amazing in terms of the measure of detail and control that you can get out of it. Really, really exquisitely done, and great job by Relab. There you have it. Plugin of the week: Relab development, the VSR REV 6000. Fantastic emulation of the reverb side of the System 6000 by TC Electronic. Check it out.